Hey, welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're tackling something fundamental, something that, well, it underpins so much of the world around us.
Yeah.
Business.
Yeah, it really does.
But we're not just dipping a toe in. We're taking a deep dive into a single, powerful source that aims to cut through just the overwhelming noise and get straight to the core essentials. The source for our deep dive today is the book, The Personal MBA, a world-class business education in a single volume by Josh Kaufman.
Mm-hmm.
And the central idea behind it is just incredibly compelling, I think.
It really is. Kaufman starts this whole journey by confronting the sheer daunting volume of information out there related to business.
It's huge.
It's enormous. I mean, imagine the Library of Congress that holds something like 1.2 million books categorized under business and economics.
1.2 million.
Yeah. That's already staggering, right? But it doesn't stop there. According to Boker, the folks who track ISBNs, over 11,000 new business books are published worldwide every single year.
Every year.
11,000. 11,000. Add to that the millions, possibly billions, of articles, blog posts, reports, videos. It's an absolute tsunami of information.
And I love how Kaufman puts it in the source. He does the math. If you tried to read just that Library of Congress collection, reading nonstop, like around the clock at an average pace,
Yeah.
it would take you over 500 years.
500.
Factor in basic human needs like food and sleep, and you're looking at more than 800 years.
Wow.
The idea of trying to consume it all is just, it's impossible. Utterly impossible.
Precisely. And Kaufman isn't afraid to point out that, frankly, a significant chunk of this isn't gold.
Right.
He mentions hastily assembled texts by consultants who are more interested in creating a 300-page business card than providing genuinely useful information.
Ouch. But probably true in many cases.
Yeah, probably. So not only is there this ocean of data, but much of it is just chaff. It's not the valuable wheat. Kaufman's project actually began because he felt this frustration. This was after college. He wasn't going the traditional MBA route.
Yeah.
Not initially, anyway. Okay. But he was intensely curious about how the business world actually worked. So he started researching and synthesizing information for himself, trying to find a filter,
Like what really matters here.
Exactly. To separate the truly essential concepts, the diamonds from the rough, it was like a personal quest, tracking which resources actually delivered value.
And he started sharing this online.
He did. He started sharing these findings online, and kind of unexpectedly, it really resonated with a lot of people. It just took on a life of its own, and, well, it permanently changed his path.
So our mission in this deep dive is to walk through some of these core essential concepts that Kaufman identified and distilled. We want to understand what they are, why they're so fundamental to, how value is created and exchanged in the world, and how grasping them can provide a shortcut to being genuinely well-informed. It's kind of about adopting that mindset Jacob Bernowski captured.
Oh, I love that quote.
Yeah. It is important that students bring a certain ragamuffin, barefoot irreverence to their studies. They are not here to worship what is known, but to question it.
That's it. Question it. Don't just accept it.
Exactly. We're not just accepting business as some mysterious black box. We're questioning its components, filtering for the essentials. And you might be listening and thinking, okay, but I'm not starting a business. Why should I spend my attention here? And that's a really great question.
It is.
Understanding these core ideas, these fundamentals of how value is created, how people make decisions, how systems work. It's not just for entrepreneurs, is it?
Not at all. It can help you navigate your career, make smarter decisions with your own resources, understand the economic news you hear every day.
Right. Evaluate opportunities, maybe.
Evaluate opportunities, or just simply see the world around you with a clearer lens. These are principles that apply far beyond the boardroom.
Okay, so let's unpack some of them. Let's start with arguably the most exciting part. You've got an idea. How do you evaluate it?
Yes,
Yeah.
The brilliant idea.
Having a brilliant idea feels exciting, right? That light bulb moment.
Yeah.
But the source quickly moves beyond just the spark, doesn't it? It provides a really practical framework for assessing if that idea actually has a real shot in the market.
It really does.
It's like a checklist
Yeah.
to ground your enthusiasm in reality.
It absolutely is. Kaufman lays out 10 factors that are, crucial for evaluating how attractive a market or a specific business idea within that market actually is.
Okay.
Let's dive into each one because they provide a pretty robust lens for assessment.
Let's do it. Factor one.
First up is urgency. So, how much do people want or need the solution right now?
Right now. Okay.
Think about the example given. Renting an old movie versus going to see the first showing of a brand new blockbuster on opening night.
Okay, yeah. Big difference.
Huge difference, right? Renting an old movie has low urgency. You can do it literally anytime. The need isn't pressing.
Yeah.
Seeing that new movie on opening night, high urgency. It's a cultural event. Everyone's talking about it. Spoilers are everywhere. It's only in theaters for a limited time. People feel a strong, immediate pull to experience it.
So a business tapping into high urgency often has an easier time getting initial traction.
Generally, yes. That immediate need pulls people in.
That makes sense. It's about the intensity of the customer's need in the present moment, which I guess also relates to the size of the potential pool of customers, right?
Yeah.
How many people feel that need?
Exactly. That leads straight into the second factor, market size. How many people are actively purchasing things like this? Is it a tiny niche group or is it a vast population?
Underwater basket weaving versus...
Right. The source contrasts those extremes. Like, the market for underwater basket weaving courses likely very, very small and specialized versus the market for, say, cancer cures.
Which is tragically massive.
Tragically massive, affecting millions globally. Now, a larger market potentially means more customers, though it often also means more competition. But the point is, you need enough potential buyers to actually sustain a business.
Got it. So, urgency, market size.
Yeah.
What's third?
Third, we look at pricing potential. What's the highest realistic price a typical customer would actually pay for the value you're offering?
Was the ceiling.
Exactly. And this varies wildly depending on the perceived value and the industry. The examples here are pretty stark. A single lollipop might sell for, what, 5 cents?
Mm-hmm.
While a complex defense asset like an aircraft carrier sells for billions of dollars.
Right, different ends of the spectrum.
Completely. Understanding the ceiling on what customers are willing to pay for your specific offer is absolutely critical to figuring out if you can even make a profit.
Right, because a great idea at a price no one will pay isn't a business. Simple as that.
Simple as that.
And even if they will pay, you've got to figure out how to reach them without spending more than you make finding them.
Precisely. Which brings us neatly to factor 4, cost of customer acquisition. How easy and how expensive is it in money and effort to find and acquire a new paying customer?
Okay.
Consider a fast food restaurant built right off a busy interstate highway exit. Customers kind of just come to them because of the location and the big sign that's relatively easy and cheap acquisition.
They're already there.
Contrast that with, say, a company vying for major government contracts. They might spend millions of dollars and years on proposals, lobbying, negotiations, just to land a single deal.
Wow. Huge difference in cost.
Enormous difference. Lower acquisition costs mean you keep more of the revenue from each sale. Makes sense, right?
Totally. Okay, factor 5.
Factor 5 is cost of value delivery. So once you have a customer, how much does it actually cost you in money, time, effort to create and deliver the product or service?
The cost of actually doing the thing.
Exactly. Delivering a digital file over the internet once the infrastructure is built is almost free per unit, right?
Practically zero.
Practically zero. But inventing a complex new physical product, designing it, manufacturing it, distributing it, that involves huge costs, potentially millions, to build factories, supply chains.
A much higher cost per item delivered.
Much higher. Lower delivery costs generally translate to higher profit margins.
Okay, so let me recap quickly. You need a good number of customers, market size, who feel a real need now, urgency, who will pay a decent price, pricing potential, who are relatively cheap to find, cost of acquisition, and cheap to serve, cost of value delivery.
You got it. That's a good summary of the first 5.
What about standing out from the crowd? There's usually competition.
Absolutely. That's factor 6. Uniqueness of offer. How different is what you're providing compared to your competitors? And just as importantly, how easy is it for someone else to copy you?
The copycat problem.
Exactly. A hair salon, for example. It's a relatively easy business to start. There are many of them. The offering isn't particularly unique, and it's pretty easy to copy.
Sure, you need scissors, a chair.
Right. On the other hand, a company developing private space travel capability.
Yeah. Different league.
Totally different league. That's highly unique, requires immense technical skill, huge capital investment, and it's incredibly difficult to replicate. High uniqueness and low copyability give you a much stronger competitive advantage.
Makes sense. What's number 7?
7th is speed to market. How quickly can you go from just having the idea to actually having something you can sell and get in front of customers?
How fast can you get going?
Yeah. Offering to mow your neighbor's lawn takes, what, minutes to prepare? Maybe buy some gas?
Right.
Starting a fully regulated licensed bank that's years of approvals, infrastructure building, compliance hurdles.
So faster speed to market means you can start generating revenue and getting real-world feedback much sooner.
Exactly. Less time burning cash before you make any.
Okay, number 8.
Factor 8 is upfront investment. How much capital do you need to invest before you can make your very first sale?
The initial hurdle.
The initial hurdle. To start a cleaning service as a housekeeper, you might just need some relatively inexpensive cleaning supplies.
Right, maybe a few $100.
Maybe. To start a gold mining operation, you need millions for land leases, heavy machinery, infrastructure, permits, all before you even dig for the first nugget.
Yeah, slightly bigger investment.
Just slightly. Lower upfront investment reduces that initial risk and obviously makes it easier to get started.
That's a big one for a lot of people, that upfront cost.
Okay, 2 more factors to go.
9th is upsell potential. So after a customer buys from you the first time, can you offer them related secondary products or services?
Keeping them coming back for more.
Exactly. The classic example is the razor, right? You sell the handle.
And then they need the blades forever.
Forever. And shaving cream. The business makes recurring revenue from those upsells. But if you sell someone a single-use item like, say, a Frisbee, there's no inherent need for a secondary purchase unless they lose the first one or it breaks.
Right. Limited repeat business built in. Correct. Upsell potential allows you to increase the lifetime value of each customer you acquire.
Okay, and the final factor, number 10.
Finally, factor 10, evergreen potential. Once you've created the initial offer, how much ongoing work is required to keep selling it or delivering it?
Ah, passive income potential.
Sort of, yeah. If you're a business consultant, every hour you bill requires your ongoing time and effort. You start working, the revenue stops. But if you write and publish a book, you create it once, but you can sell it over and over again without needing to recreate the value for each new customer.
Right, the work is mostly upfront.
The work is mostly upfront. Offerings with high evergreen potential can create more scalable, potentially passive revenue streams over time.
That's the fantastic checklist, seriously. It really forces you to think through the practicalities of an idea, moving past that initial, rosy glow.
Yeah, it grounds it.
It's not about killing dreams. It's about giving them a structured reality check. And as you touched on earlier, you can apply these factors to so many things beyond just starting a traditional business.
Absolutely.
Thinking about learning a new skill. What's the urgency for you? What's the potential market size for that skill in your career? What's the upfront investment of time and money? What's the evergreen potential? Does it need constant updating?
Yeah, it's a really versatile framework.
It's a powerful framework for evaluating any opportunity or project, really.
Definitely.
Okay, so you've evaluated your idea using that 10-factor lens and perhaps decided, yeah, this has potential. You enter the market and almost certainly you'll find others already there. Competition.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, that word often brings up feelings of fear or intimidation, right?
Yeah.
But the source offers a really different, almost liberating perspective on it.
It does, and I love that quote from Henry Ford that's included. The competitor to be feared is one who never bothers about you at all, but goes on making his own business better all the time.
Focus on your own game.
Focus on your own game. It's a great reminder. But the key insight here, the real hidden benefit of competition, is that its very existence proves a market exists.
Ah, okay, that's interesting.
Think about it. If people are already successfully selling something similar to what you envision, it means customers want it and are willing to pay for it.
Right. The demand is validated.
The demand is validated. This is huge. It bypasses the single biggest risk for any new venture, what the source calls the iron law of the market.
Which
states that if people don't want what you're offering, nothing else matters. They simply won't buy it. Competition proves you're potentially on the right side of that law.
So instead of being afraid of competitors, you should almost be thankful. Because they did the hard work of proving there's demand.
In a way, yes. They demonstrated that there's already an established behavior pattern of customers opening their wallets for this kind of solution.
Oh, okay.
This allows you to spend less time and money trying to prove market demand exists and more time focused on developing your own unique offer and figuring out how to best serve those existing customers.
So seeing multiple successful businesses in a space isn't necessarily a bad sign.
Often, it's a good sign. It indicates the market is robust and likely not a dead end.
And a really practical way to gain insights from competitors, according to the source, is simply to become their customer.
Yeah, go buy from them.
Experience their offering firsthand. What specific things can you learn by doing that?
Oh, this is fantastic hands-on market research. When you become a customer, you get to see the entire process from the inside out.
Okay, like what?
You experience the value they actually provide. You see how they try to get your attention in the first place. You learn their pricing, what their sales process feels like,
How they treat you.
how they treat you, what makes their customers happy or unhappy if you look at reviews or forums, how they handle problems or support requests, and perhaps most crucially, what needs they aren't currently meeting or what frustrations their customers experience.
You get the inside scoop.
You get the inside scoop by living it yourself. You gather invaluable intelligence before you commit to your own specific strategy or offering. It's like stress testing the market by seeing what the established players are doing well and, importantly, where they fall short.
That makes a ton of sense. Learn before you leap.
Exactly. This also ties into understanding different fundamental ways businesses actually deliver value to customers. The source mentions 5 primary methods, although it only really goes into detail on one in the excerpts we have, which is leases.
Okay, leases. How does that model work?
The core mechanism of a lease business model is, well, you acquire an asset that people want to use, but perhaps don't want to or maybe can't buy outright.
Right, like a car or a house.
Exactly. Luxury cars, speedboats, expensive real estate are great examples. And then you lease it to them on terms that are favorable to you, the owner, while also making sure you protect your asset from loss or damage.
So the customer gets the benefit without the huge upfront cost.
Precisely. They get the benefit of using a valuable asset without the massive purchase price, and potentially without long-term maintenance headaches, depending on the lease terms. They're paying for the use and the experience for a defined period.
And for the owner, what's the key?
For the owner, the critical financial element is ensuring that the cumulative revenue generated from leasing the asset over its useful life covers its initial purchase price and provides a profit.
Makes sense.
You also have to account for ongoing costs like maintenance, repairs, insurance, and the eventual need to replace the asset when it wears out or becomes obsolete. The challenge is setting the right lease terms and finding enough customers over time to make the asset pay for itself and generate returns before its value diminishes too much.
So it's managing that asset life cycle against its revenue potential.
Exactly. It's a model built on asset management over time.
Okay, so you've got an idea, you've looked at the market, competition, maybe you're thinking about a model like leasing. How do you then reach out and actually connect with potential customers in this, incredibly noisy world?
The connection challenge.
You can have the most valuable offer, but if no one knows about it, or no one's listening,
It doesn't
that's
matter.
a bear.
It doesn't matter at all. This is where concepts like feedback, attention, and permission become absolutely paramount. And getting useful feedback is vital early on. Crucially, not all feedback is created equal.
Right. Don't just ask your mom.
Exactly. That's the first tip the source gives. Get feedback from real potential customers, not just your friends and family. Your loved ones are biased. They want to encourage you. They might pull their punches or sugarcoat things.
You need the unvarnished truth.
You need opinions from people who aren't emotionally invested in your success. Second, ask open-ended questions, the who, what, when, where, why, how questions. Avoid leading questions that sort of suggest the answer you want to hear.
Don't ask, isn't this a great idea?
Right. Ask something like, tell me about the last time you faced this problem, and then this is key, listen way more than you talk. You're there to learn, not to sell them on your idea at this stage. Pay attention not just to what they say, but how they react, what their past behavior has been regarding similar problems or solutions.
Actions speak louder than words.
Often, yes. Third, cultivate a calm demeanor. It can be uncomfortable, definitely, to hear criticism of an idea you care about, but getting honest, critical feedback is incredibly valuable. Someone telling you your idea won't work and why is doing you a huge favor.
Saving you time and money down the road.
Potentially saving you years. Don't get defensive. Thank them for their honesty.
Yeah.
Fourth, process the feedback, but with a grain of salt. Even discouraging feedback contains valuable information you can use to refine your idea. But the source makes a crucial point here.
Which is?
The absolute worst feedback you can get isn't negativity, it's total apathy.
Indifference.
Indifference. If people just shrug, don't care at all, positively or negatively, you likely don't have a viable idea because it doesn't tap into a sufficiently urgent or important need for them.
That's a really interesting point. A strong negative reaction is actually better than no reaction.
Yeah. Often, yes. Because it means you struck some kind of nerve. Apathy is the kiss of death. And fifth, the most significant feedback of all Give potential customers the opportunity to pre-order, even if the offer isn't fully ready yet.
Ah, the put your money where your mouth is test.
Exactly. This is called shadow testing. Anyone can say, oh, yeah, I'd buy that. But are they willing to actually commit money? Even a small deposit. That is the ultimate validation. If they pull out their wallet, they're serious. If they hesitate or make excuses, well, the verbal feedback about how much they loved it was likely just them being polite.
Willingness to pay is the strongest signal of genuine interest.
It really is. Nothing beats it.
Shadow testing, that's a great term for it. It transforms hypothetical interest into concrete action. Okay, so to even get to the point of asking for feedback or pre-orders, you need to capture their attention.
Yes, the scarcest resource.
The Seth Godin's quote is spot on here. In an attention economy like this one, marketers struggle for attention. If you don't have it, you lose.
Absolutely. Just look around us. Think about your own day. Our attention is constantly fragmented. Work, email, social media notifications, news alerts, family, personal tasks. There's just too much vying for our focus.
Information overload is real.
It's totally real. And as a result, we've all become incredibly good at filtering out things we don't deem immediately interesting or useful. So to get someone's attention in this environment, you have to find a way around those filters. You have to be genuinely more compelling, interesting, or useful than everything else competing for their limited attention span at that moment.
You have to earn it.
High-quality attention has to be earned. And the source makes a really key distinction here. It's not about getting any attention, it's about getting the right kind of attention.
What's the difference?
Well, getting attention by, say, yelling in a pink bunny suit in the middle of the street might work.
You'd get attention.
You'd definitely get attention, but it's unlikely to attract prospects who want to buy, I don't know, accounting software.
Right. Wrong audience, wrong context.
Exactly. Business is ultimately about profitable sales, not just popularity or notoriety. You want to earn the attention of people who are actually likely to become customers. Spending your energy seeking broad, irrelevant publicity or acting like a socialite, as the source puts it, might feel good, but if it distracts from creating value and connecting with potential buyers, it's basically wasted effort.
Which directly brings us to the concept of permission, another Seth Godin idea highlighted in the source. Selling to people who actually want to hear from you is more effective than interrupting strangers who don't.
This is the crucial counterpoint to what you might call the spam approach.
Unsolicited messages.
Unsolicited messages. Think about your own spam folder. It's full of stuff you never asked for and probably never look at. Legally, many businesses still rely on equivalents, cold calls, mass direct mail to bot lists, broad advertising campaigns that hit everyone regardless of interest. Interruptions.
The interruption model?
The interruption model. And this worked better decades ago, right? When media options were limited, you could run a few TV ads and reach a huge percentage of the population.
Fewer channels, captive audience.
Exactly. But today, people have incredibly effective filtering tools. We can ignore unsolicited emails, block calls, skip commercials, change streaming services, use ad blockers. The moment you interrupt someone with something they didn't ask for and don't immediately care about, poof, they're gone. Their attention moves elsewhere.
So what's the alternative?
The alternative is asking for permission to follow up. Ideally, after you've provided some initial valuable content or experience for free.
Earn the right to talk to them again.
Precisely. By offering genuine value first, a helpful article, a useful tool, an entertaining video, you've earned a moment of their attention. If they find that initial value compelling, you can then ask, hey, would you like me to continue providing you with this kind of value? Can I send you more tips like this?
Like signing up for a newsletter.
Exactly. That's how you build an email list, get newsletter subscribers, or gain followers who genuinely want to hear from you. It allows you to focus your ongoing communication efforts on prospects you know are interested instead of shouting into the void.
Permission becomes an asset.
Permission is an incredibly valuable asset. It is far easier and cheaper to communicate with someone who is giving you permission to contact them than to constantly blast messages at uninterested strangers. Sending an email or making a targeted phone call to someone who is expecting and wants to hear from you is efficient and inexpensive.
How do you get it then?
The process is simple, really. Provide value first, then ask if they'd like to receive more value. But, and this is vital, You have to use that permission responsibly.
Don't abuse the privilege.
Exactly. Don't spam them. Don't send irrelevant messages. Don't bombard them. Be explicit about what kind of value they'll receive when they give permission, before they give it, and then consistently deliver on that promise. Honoring the permission you're granted builds trust and a deeper, more productive relationship with those interested prospects.
So earn attention by being useful, then build permission to continue the conversation. That all leads up, I guess, to the fundamental moment in business, the transaction.
It's a moment of truth.
As Sam Walton, the founder of Walmart, famously put it, there is only one boss, the customer. And you can fire everybody in the company from the chairman on down simply by spending his money somewhere else.
It's so true. A transaction at its core is just an exchange of economic value. You have something I want, I have something you want, and we trade. In a business context, the transaction is the defining moment because it's the only point where money flows into the business from the outside world.
Everything else is an expense, essentially.
Pretty much. Without completing transactions, a business cannot survive, period. And you can only complete transactions for things that are genuinely economically valuable things that prospective customers actually want and are willing to pay for.
Seems obvious, but...
It seems obvious, but as the source points out, many new businesses fail right here because they create something cool or interesting that people ultimately don't want enough to actually pay for.
The build it and they will come fallacy.
Exactly. That's why developing and testing a minimum economically viable offer, or MEVO as Kaufman calls it, is so critical early on. It forces you to confirm that you've created something with sufficient economic value before you invest huge amounts of time and money building it out completely.
Test the value proposition first. So for any new venture, the absolute priority is to get to that first profitable transaction as quickly as possible.
That's the goal.
That's the moment you cross the line from being just a project and idea to being a real business.
And to increase both the likelihood and the value of those transactions, the source introduces the concept of value-based selling.
Okay, what's that about?
Warren Buffett's perspective is perfect here. Price is what you pay. Value is what you get.
Price versus value.
Value-based selling isn't about calculating your costs and adding a standard markup. It's about deeply understanding why your offer is valuable to the specific purchaser and clearly articulating and reinforcing those reasons.
Focusing on their benefit.
Exactly. The source uses that great example of selling a service to a Fortune 50 company that will increase their annual revenue by, say, $100 million.
Okay, huge impact.
Huge impact. Is that service worth $10 million to them? Absolutely. Because they gain $90 million net. It doesn't matter if it only costs you $100 to deliver that service or if a competitor offers something vaguely similar for $10,000. Your service creates vastly more value for that specific customer than the alternatives, and that justifies a much higher price.
It's tied to the outcome they achieve.
Precisely. It's about shifting the conversation from your costs or features to the tangible benefits and outcomes the customer will receive. When you effectively communicate and reinforce the reasons why someone should buy from you based on the value they get, they are much more likely to complete the transaction and are often willing to pay more because they understand the significant return they are getting on their investment.
That makes a lot of sense. Focus on the ROI for the customer. But even with a great offer and clear value, there's still one major hurdle to any transaction: risk.
Yes, the fear factor.
As Clint Eastwood famously quipped, if you want a guarantee, buy a toaster. Suggesting guarantees aren't always possible, maybe.
Well, buyers, by nature, hate to lose. They hate feeling stupid, wasting money, or taking a chance that doesn't pay off.
Yeah.
In any transaction, the purchaser perceives risk. What if this product doesn't work as promised? What if this service doesn't solve my problem? What if I regret this purchase later?
Those doubts can kill a sale.
They absolutely can. These perceived risks are significant barriers to purchase and can stop a sale cold.
So how do you overcome that?
Risk reversal. That's the strategy designed to combat this fear. It involves transferring some, or ideally all, of the perceived risk from the buyer to the seller.
The seller takes the risk.
Essentially, yes. The seller says, in effect, I will bear the risk of this not working out for you. I guarantee I will make it right if you're not satisfied.
Like a money-back guarantee.
Exactly. The bedding industry example in the source is a classic. Companies offer extended, often 12-month or even longer, 100% money-back guarantees on mattresses.
Which seems crazy risky for them.
On the surface, it does. But think about what it does for the buyer. It completely eliminates their perceived risk. If the mattress isn't comfortable after a few months, they don't feel trapped or stupid or angry. They just return it. This removes the downside for the buyer, making them far, far more likely to take the plunge and make the purchase in the first place.
It lowers the barrier to saying yes.
Dramatically. It's like the take the puppy home analogy from pet stores. Take this puppy home for a week, and if it doesn't work out for your family, you can bring it back.
How many puppies actually come back?
Very few puppies ever come back. The trial period drastically reduces the perceived risk of commitment for the buyer, increasing the likelihood of the initial transaction taking the puppy home happening. Once they've experienced it, bonded with it, the hassle of returning it often outweighs the perceived downside they worried about initially.
That's clever. But isn't it uncomfortable for sellers? What about people abusing the system?
Oh, it can definitely be uncomfortable for sellers who also dislike losing money or feeling taken advantage of by the few people who might abuse a generous guarantee. But here's the key insight from the source.
Okay.
The buyer faces the risk of losing money on this one purchase from this one seller. It feels significant to them. The seller, however, faces the risk of a few returns, but they serve many customers and can spread that risk across a large volume of successful sales.
So the risk is distributed for the seller.
Exactly. The source argues convincingly that offering a strong, clear, and extended risk-reversing guarantee almost always maximizes total sales, revenue, and ultimately profit, because the increase in purchases from removing the buyer's fear far outweighs the costs of honoring the guarantee for the small percentage of returns or abuses. It builds trust and removes friction.
That's a powerful reframing viewing guarantees, not just as customer service, but as a core sales strategy. Okay, so you're making sales, money is coming in. How do you really know if the business is healthy and growing financially? Let's look at some of those financial fundamentals, starting with break-even.
Right. Break even. The source uses a hypothetical business scenario to illustrate this well. Imagine a business generating $100,000 in monthly revenue with $50,000 in monthly operating expenses.
Sounds good. $50K profit per month, right?
On the surface, yes, it looks like $50,000 in profit every month, but it's often not that simple, especially for new businesses.
Why not?
Well, there's usually a significant amount of upfront investment needed before the business generates any revenue at all. If that hypothetical business spent, say, a year in development, racking up $50,000 in expenses each month before it started generating revenue.
That's $600,000 spent before $1 came in.
Exactly. That's a $600,000 initial investment that needs to be recouped from future profits.
Okay, so break-even isn't just about monthly profit.
Not at all. Break-even is the specific point in time where the business's total cumulative revenue since the day it started exceeds its total cumulative expenses since the day it started.
Paying back the entire past investment.
Exactly. It's the point where the business has paid back all the initial investments and development costs and truly begins creating wealth, rather than just consuming it or paying off debt. In that example, even with $50,000 in positive cash flow each month, it would take 12 months of that surplus just to pay back the $600,000 initial investment.
So it takes a full year after becoming cash flow positive to actually break even overall.
In that scenario, yes. Until that 12-month mark, or whenever total revenue exceeds total historical expenses, the business isn't truly profitable in the cumulative sense. It's still in the process of paying itself back for the startup phase.
And that break-even point keeps moving, right?
And it's constantly changing as cumulative revenue and expenses fluctuate month to month. Keeping a running tally of total money in versus total money out from day one is absolutely essential to know if you've actually made money overall, or if you're just cash flow positive while still being technically underwater from the start.
So more revenue and less ongoing expense get you there faster.
Exactly. They accelerate reaching that crucial break-even point and achieving true self-sustainability.
Okay, that distinction between monthly cash flow and overall break-even is critical. Now, for those big lumpy investments like that $600K startup cost or buying machinery, there's a concept called amortization.
Yes, amortization. This is basically a way to account for the cost of a significant long-term resource investment by spreading that cost out logically over its estimated useful life, or over the number of units it helps produce.
Spreading the costs back.
Spreading the cost out. The source uses the slightly whimsical example of building a factory for $100 million with the capacity to produce 10 million faux dogs.
Faux dogs, got it.
Instead of saying the factory cost $100 million, a huge number that's hard to relate to individual sales. Amortization allows you to say the cost of the factory is spread across those 10 million units it can produce. So it adds $10 to the cost of each faux dog. $100 10M units.
Okay, so you see the cost per item.
Exactly. If you sell the faux dogs for $100 each, That $10 factory cost per unit seems manageable within your overall cost structure, leaving room for profit.
It helps assess profitability on a per-unit basis.
All right. Amortization helps you decide if a large expense makes sense on a per unit or per project basis. The Adobe InDesign software example is also great. A $700 license fee seems expensive if you only use it once.
Here it is.
But if you realistically expect to use it to typeset, say, 10 books over its useful life, and each book brings in $1,000 in revenue, the software cost is effectively amortized to just $70 per book. $700, 10 books.
Suddenly seems much more reasonable.
Much more reasonable. That $70 per project is a small percentage of the revenue generated, making the $700 investment look very worthwhile over time. However, and this is a really critical point from the source, amortization relies heavily on your predictions.
Predictions about what?
Predictions about the asset's useful life and, crucially, the volume of units or projects it will actually support. The Crocs example is used as a cautionary tale.
Oh, yeah, the shoes.
The shoes. They invested millions in factories, assuming those massive sales levels would continue indefinitely. When the fad cooled off and sales plummeted, they were left with all that expensive factory capacity and unsold inventory.
Oh.
Big oops. The initial factory cost was then spread over far fewer units than they predicted, which skyrocketed the actual amortized cost per pair of shoes and contributed to significant financial losses.
So the predictions have to be realistic.
They have to be realistic. Amortization is a smart way to evaluate big investments, but the underlying sales and usage predictions are tricky and can have huge consequences if they're wrong.
It's a planning tool, but garbage in, garbage out on the predictions.
Yeah.
Okay. Speaking of evaluating investments, how do we measure the value created not just in money, but maybe more broadly? That's where return on investment, ROI, comes in.
Right. ROI.
William A. Ward's quote is poignant here. Wise are those who learn that the bottom line doesn't always have to be the top priority.
That's a great quote for ROI. Return on investment is a fundamental concept. It's the value created from an investment of any kind: money, time, effort, resources.
Not just dollars.
Not just dollars, though that's the most common way people think of it. Financially, if you invest $1,000 and get $100 in profit back, that's a 10% ROI. Simple enough. And it's useful for comparing financial alternatives, like putting money in different savings accounts with different interest rates, which one gives a better return.
Sure.
But the source really emphasizes that ROI isn't just about currency. A crucial non-monetary ROI is return on invested time.
The value of your time.
The value of your time. The extreme example is working nonstop, 247 for an entire year to make $1 million. Financially, the ROI on whatever initial setup costs you had might look astronomical, but the ROI on your time, your health, your sanity, abysmal.
Yeah, probably not worth it.
Probably not. True ROI really considers all the resources invested, including your life energy. It's also worth noting that ROI tends to diminish with increased investment, generally. The more you spend, the lower the percentage return often tends to be. And critically, any ROI estimate about the future.
It's just a guess.
It's always a speculative prediction, a semi-educated guess, as the source puts it. You only know the certain true ROI after the investment has been made and the returns have actually materialized. So it's vital to consider the risks involved, no matter how high the potential ROI seems beforehand. Sometimes that sure bet doesn't pay off.
Right.
And if you invested everything based only on the predicted ROI, you could be in serious trouble. Always factor in the risk.
Okay, these financial concepts, break-even, amortization, ROI, they really ground the reality of turning an idea into a sustainable venture. Let's shift gears now to something equally fundamental. Understanding human behavior and how we make decisions.
The human element.
Because business is ultimately about interacting with people, customers, colleagues, partners. And these principles apply just as much to understanding ourselves, don't they?
Absolutely. The source introduces perceptual control as a powerful model for understanding why we behave the way we do. It contrasts this with the older, but still surprisingly common in business, behaviorist model.
Like Skinner.
Yeah.
Carrots and sticks.
Exactly. Skinner, Pavlov, the idea that external stimuli directly control behavior. Perceptual control theory, developed largely by William T. Powers, offers a different view. It suggests our behavior is driven by internal goals related to keeping our perceptions of the world within acceptable boundaries.
Okay. Keeping perceptions in check. How does that work?
The thermostat analogy is a great way to grasp a simple version of control system. It has a set point, right? A desired temperature.
Yeah.
It doesn't act randomly. It only acts turns the heater or AC on or off when its perception of the actual room temperature deviates from that set point, its goal. Its action is solely aimed at controlling its perception back to the desired state.
So the action controls the perception to match the goal.
Exactly. Humans are vastly more complex, of course, but we operate on the same fundamental principle. We don't put on a coat because the cold weather forces us to, in a stimulus response way. We put on a coat because we feel cold. Our perception of our body temperature is outside our desired comfortable range, and we take the action of putting on a coat to control that perception, to bring it back within acceptable limits.
Our actions control our perceptions to meet our internal goals.
That's the core idea. Actions control perceptions. William T. Power's ship example makes this even clearer. Imagine a rock on the deck of a ship in a raging storm. It's passive, right? It just gets tossed around randomly by the waves and wind.
Sure.
Now imagine a human on that same deck. The human isn't passive. They're constantly taking diverse actions, bracing themselves, shifting their weight, holding on to railings, all aimed at controlling their perception of staying upright and balanced. The environment, the storm, the rolling deck, dictates which actions are possible or necessary, but the underlying goal is always to control that perception of stability.
That's a fascinating way to look at behavior. It really shifts the focus from external triggers to our internal goals and perceptions. So if our actions are about controlling perceptions, what happens when we have multiple conflicting internal goals that try to control the same thing?
Yes. Internal conflict.
Like wanting to be productive, but also really wanting to relax and watch TV.
That's precisely what leads to conflict, as the source explains it through this perceptual control lens. Conflict occurs when two or more control systems within us are trying to influence the same perception or action in mutually exclusive ways.
Fighting for the steering wheel.
Exactly. Procrastination is a perfect example. Part of you has a goal related to getting work done, trying to control the perception of task progress or being responsible. Another part has a goal related to rest, comfort, or avoiding difficulty, trying to control the perception of relaxation or avoiding stress. Both systems are trying to influence your physical action should you sit down and work, or should you flop on the couch, and they fight for control.
And nothing gets done properly.
Right. It's like having both the heater and the air conditioner on in the same room because they have contradictory temperature set points. They continuously expend energy fighting each other. Neither system achieves its goal. The room isn't the desired temperature for either. And the overall system, the room, or in our case, us, expends energy fruitlessly.
That explains why procrastinating can be so exhausting. You're not really resting, but you're not working either.
Exactly. You're draining energy on that internal struggle. Identifying these competing control systems and their conflicting goals is the first step toward resolving the conflict and actually choosing one action.
Understanding those internal goals and how they relate to actions seems absolutely key to actually achieving things. The source offers a practical planning tool for this. The fivefold how.
Yes, the fivefold how. It's a simple yet incredibly effective technique for breaking down big, potentially fuzzy goals into concrete, manageable actions.
How does it work?
You start with your high-level goal or desired outcome, your what do I want statement. Let's say it's pay off all my debt.
Okay, big goal.
Big goal. Then you repeatedly ask the question, how would I achieve that? Or how would I go about doing that for each level of the plan, moving from the abstract towards the concrete? So how would I pay off all my debt? Answer, well, I'd need to make extra payments.
Okay.
How would I make extra payments? I need to allocate X dollars from my paycheck each month. How would I do that? Maybe set up an automatic transfer from my checking to my debt payment the day after payday. How would I do that? Log into my online banking now and find the auto transfer setting.
You keep drilling down until you hit a specific action.
You keep asking how, until you arrive at the very next specific physical action you can take right now. The source gives other examples like reducing work hours, moving house, or even ending a relationship. This process works for any complex goal.
What's the benefit of breaking it down like that?
The beauty of this process is that it clarifies ambiguity. It turns a vague aspiration, I want to be debt-free someday, into a clear chain of cause and effect actions. And when done properly, each small step you take along that chain gives you an experience of the desired outcome. Setting up that auto transfer gives you a feeling of taking control, of getting closer to freedom, which reinforces your motivation to keep going.
It connects the big goal to the immediate present.
Powerfully connects big goals to small, executable steps you can do today.
That method feels incredibly practical for tackling anything daunting. Okay, so once you've planned your actions using something like the fivefold how, You inevitably face choices along the way. And the future is always uncertain. Making choices is the act of decision.
Yes, the commitment.
Jose Ortega y Gasset's quote captures the personal responsibility so well. At the moment of every day, I must decide what I am going to do the next moment, and no one can make this decision for me or take my place in this.
It's true. To make a decision literally means to cut off, like scissors cutting other possibilities. It's a commitment to a specific plan or path of action. And while frameworks and information, like the 10 factors or the five-fold how, can provide valuable input, they cannot make the decision for you. That responsibility rests solely with the individual.
I mean, we never have all the information, do we?
Never. Decisions are always made with incomplete information because the future is inherently unknowable. That feeling of indecisiveness, of being stuck, isn't typically due to a genuine lack of information. More often, it's the brain engaging in what the source calls mental thrashing.
Mental thrashing.
Yeah, the brain trying to resolve ambiguity and simulate countless possible scenarios simultaneously because no commitment has been made. And interestingly, the source highlights that this struggle often ceases once any decision has made any commitment because the brain can then focus its energy on planning and executing the chosen path.
So making a decision, even if imperfect, is better than staying stuck in indecision.
Often, yes. Retired General Colin Powell's rule is pragmatic wisdom for this. Gather maybe 40–70% of the available information, then trust your gut and make the decision.
Don't wait for 100%.
Don't wait for 100% certainty. It's usually impossible and often means you miss the window of opportunity entirely. Make the decision and move forward. You can always course correct later if needed based on new information.
And not deciding is still a decision, right?
That's a critical point. Not making a decision is itself a decision to let inertia or external circumstances dictate your path. The world doesn't pause for your indecision. It's better to make decisions clearly and consciously. Hesitation is often rooted in loss aversion, that fear of closing off options, of choosing the wrong path.
Keep your options open indefinitely.
Right. But the source points out that without a concrete decision, the brain can't effectively use its powerful mental simulation capabilities to plan how to get to the desired outcome. Simply stating, even just to yourself, okay, I'm deciding to do X now, helps activate the brain's planning circuits.
It gives the brain a direction.
It gives the brain a direction. And for those really tough decisions where the options seem genuinely equal, where there's no objectively best choice after weighing pros and cons, Steve Pavlina offers a useful tiebreaker question.
What's that?
Out of the available options, which experience do I want to have?
Focus on the feeling or the lifestyle?
Exactly. The source uses the example of someone named Kelsey choosing between staying put or moving to NYC. Objectively, maybe the pros and cons balanced out, but asking which experience do I want? The experience of living in New York versus staying cut through the analysis paralysis. Choosing the desired experience brought clarity and relief when optimization failed.
That's a great tip for getting unstuck. That idea of intentionally running mental simulations connects directly to another concept from the source.
Yeah.
Counterfactual simulation.
Yes, basically asking what if questions strategically.
It's described as applied imagination, right?
Exactly. Counterfactual simulation is consciously posing a hypothetical question, what would happen if? Or often more powerfully, a what would have to be true if question. And then allowing your brain to generate likely outcomes, scenarios, and paths based on the patterns and associations it has stored from your knowledge and experience.
Using your brain's simulation power on purpose.
On purpose. It's a remarkably powerful tool that's often underused. It allows you to force your brain to explore possibilities you might otherwise dismiss out of hand as unrealistic or impossible. You can simulate almost anything.
How did Kaufman use this himself?
His own story of leaving his corporate job at P&G is a perfect illustration. He initially thought quitting to focus on the Personal MBA full-time was maybe a year or two away. It felt like a distant, perhaps slightly unrealistic future goal.
Seemed far off.
Right. But then he ran the counterfactual simulation. What would have to be true if I left my job at P&G by my birthday, which was just a few months away at the time?
A much shorter, seemingly impossible timeline.
Exactly. By setting that seemingly impossible near-term date and asking what must be true for that to happen, his mind was forced to fill in the blanks. It generated concrete requirements related to revenue targets, number of clients, necessary savings, changes to his daily routine. This simulation revealed that the necessary pieces could potentially be assembled much faster than he had intuitively assumed.
Wow.
It showed him it was possible immediately, not in a year or two. Examining counterfactuals helps you reverse engineer possibilities. It helps you figure out the steps needed to get from where you are, point A, to where you want to be, point B, even if point B initially feels completely out of reach.
Assume the goal is achieved and work backward.
That's a great way to put it. Time spent examining counterfactuals is rarely wasted. It's highly valuable for uncovering potential paths and making informed decisions.
Oh, okay, these concepts, perceptual control, the fivefold how, decision, counterfactual simulation, they are powerful mental models, not just for business strategy, but really for understanding ourselves and guiding our own lives more effectively.
They really are. They apply broadly.
Now let's move to observing the world and the systems around us, finding patterns, and building resilience in the face of uncertainty.
Observing and adapting, yes. The source touches on finding patterns through experimenting, linking it back to those self-reflection questions it poses, like, how's your diet quality? How much sleep do you really need? When are you most energetic or productive? Where do your best ideas come from? What triggers stress for you?
Becoming more self-aware through observation.
Exactly. The process is straightforward. You notice a pattern, e.g., I always get sleepy around 2 p.m. after lunch. You experiment by changing one variable. Okay, what happens if I eat a lighter lunch tomorrow, or maybe take a short walk right after eating? You externalize, maybe jot down, or just mentally note the results. Lighter lunch plus a 10-minute walk equals no afternoon slump.
Keep what works, ditch what doesn't.
Precisely. You keep the changes that produce positive results for you and discard the ones that don't. This systematic personal testing helps you discover what truly works for your unique system over time, and these positive results accumulate. It's a form of continuous personal improvement. As they say, you never truly know until you try it yourself.
That idea of testing and finding what works for you is key.
Yeah.
Speaking of external factors that influence us, the people we spend time with have a huge impact, which the source explores with convergence and divergence.
Oh, yeah. The power of the group.
Friedrich Nietzsche's famous words remind us of the struggle. The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. No price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself.
It's a powerful quote. Convergence is that strong tendency for members of a group, any group, a company, a social circle, a family, to become more alike over time. This is how company culture forms, how shared values, beliefs, and behaviors emerge and solidify.
Fitting in.
Fitting in. And groups implicitly or explicitly police their norms. Violating those norms acts as a social signal that you don't fully belong. The source uses the phrase, the tallest blade of grass is the first to be cut.
Don't stick out too much.
Right. The workaholic culture example in the source is stark. If the norm is that everyone stays late, leaving at 5 p.m., even if your work is done and done well, can be perceived by the group as treason because it violates the established group norm of putting in visible hours.
Wow, strong pressure.
Very strong. Divergence, conversely, is the tendency for groups to become less like other groups over time, often by consciously changing norms or behaviors to differentiate themselves and maintain their distinct identity. Think about high-fashion changing styles as soon as mass-market retailers start copying them.
Maintaining uniqueness.
Exactly. And Jim Rohn's often-quoted observation is highly relevant here. You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Heard that one before.
Yeah, it resonates because it's largely true. The values, habits, and behaviors of your closest social circle exert a constant, often unconscious, pressure on you via convergence.
So you can use this consciously.
Absolutely. If you want to become more outgoing, spend more time with outgoing people. If you want to adopt a healthier lifestyle, spend time with people who prioritize health and fitness. This makes positive habit change much easier because the group norm supports, rather than hinders, your desired change.
Surround yourself with the people you want to be like.
It's a powerful strategy. The flip side, as the source notes, is that breaking away from unhelpful or detrimental groups, even if they are comfortable and familiar, can be painful, but is often necessary for personal growth. Trying to quit smoking or drinking, for instance, is incredibly difficult if your entire social network revolves around those activities. The group's convergence pressure works against you.
That's a profound insight. Consciously curating your social environment can be a powerful tool for personal change. Now, when we're evaluating ideas or situations, there's a common mental pitfall the source calls modal bias.
The my way is best bias.
Frank A. Clark said, "We find comfort among those who agree with us and growth among those who don't." which seems related.
Very related. Modal bias is that automatic, often unconscious assumption that our way of doing things, our idea or our understanding is the best one. We tend to believe we know what we're doing, and our approach is superior, even when there are other equally valid or perhaps even better ways to approach something. There's almost always more than one path.
How does this show up in business?
In business, modal bias often manifests as the infamous HEPIO rule,
Tepio.
the highest paid person's opinion.
Ah, got it.
In the absence of clear data, the boss's biased opinion often wins the day simply because their modal bias makes them inherently trust their own judgment the most, and they have the authority to enforce it.
So what's the cure for modal bias?
The antidote, as the source suggests, is twofold. Inhibition, consciously pausing and suspending your immediate judgment or the automatic assumption that you're right, and demanding data. Data is essential for supporting proposals, challenging assumptions, and moving beyond opinion battles rooted in everyone's individual bias.
Let the evidence speak.
Exactly. Without inhibiting that automatic my way is best thought and actively seeking objective information and diverse perspectives, you lose the potential value of new ideas and better approaches.
Okay, that makes sense. Suspend judgment, seek data. Now, understanding how things change over time requires understanding how feedback cycles work in systems. The source talks about feedback loops.
Yes, feedback loops are absolutely fundamental to how systems learn, adapt, and change over time. They occur simply when the output of a system in one cycle becomes an input for the next cycle.
Input becomes output becomes input.
Exactly. It creates a cycle. The source describes two main types. First, balancing loops. These tend to dampen output, leading to stability, equilibrium, and resistance to change.
Like a thermostat keeping the temperature steady.
That's a perfect example. The thermostat uses a balancing loop to keep the temperature stable around its set point. Another simple analogy is a bouncing tennis ball. Friction and air resistance take energy out of the system with each bounce, dampening the output, the height of the bounce, until it reaches equilibrium, stops bouncing. Balancing loops stabilize systems.
Okay, and the other type?
The other type is reinforcing loops. These do the opposite. They amplify output, leading to runaway growth or decay.
Things spiraling up or down.
Exactly. A price war is a classic negative reinforcing loop. One company cuts prices, forcing competitors to cut further, which necessitates more cuts, driving prices down in an accelerating loop of decay. On the positive side, compounding interest is a powerful reinforcing loop. The interest earned adds to the principal, which then earns even more interest in the next cycle, amplifying the growth exponentially over time.
So loops can drive stability or rapid change.
Correct. And most real-world systems, like your bank account balance, are complex. They're influenced by multiple, often competing balancing loops, like your spending habits, trying to keep the balance down, and reinforcing loops, like income or interest, trying to push it up. Understanding these interacting loops helps you appreciate why systems behave the way they do, why some things seem stuck while others change rapidly.
And in complex systems, especially those influenced by many feedback loops and external factors, problems and uncertainty are pretty much inevitable, aren't they?
Absolutely inevitable. The source addresses this reality with the concepts of normal accidents and resilience. Theodore Rubin's quote sets the stage perfectly. The problem is not that there are problems. The problem is expecting otherwise and thinking that having problems is a problem.
Problems are normal, basically.
Especially in complex systems. The Space Shuttle Challenger disaster is used as a stark example of what Charles Perrow termed a normal accident. It was a highly complex system with many tightly interconnected parts, interdependent. A seemingly small failure, an O-ring seal failing due to cold weather, cascaded through the system in unexpected ways, leading to a catastrophic outcome.
Because everything was so tightly linked.
Exactly. Normal accident theory suggests that in such highly complex, tightly coupled systems, small errors, unforeseen interactions, and component failures are inevitable. Risks accumulate in unpredictable ways, and major accidents become normal occurrences, statistically predictable outcomes of sheer complexity, even if the specific failure mode isn't predictable. The larger and more interconnected the system, the higher the probability that something will eventually go very wrong in a way you didn't anticipate.
So just adding more rules or controls isn't always the answer.
That's the counterintuitive point the source makes, citing Perrow. The instinctive response after an accident is often to add more controls, more safeguards, more procedures. But this can paradoxically make the system even more tightly coupled and complex, potentially increasing the risk of future, perhaps even more severe accidents because there are more interactions that can fail. It notes that NASA's response to Challenger needed to be more nuanced than just adding layers, implying a need for a different approach to safety in these complex systems.
So if accidents are normal, how do we deal with that uncertainty?
This leads directly to the crucial concept of resilience. As the ecologist C.S. Halling pointed out, sometimes forcing a system into rigid constancy, trying to eliminate all variability, actually makes it more fragile in the long run. The world is fundamentally uncertain and unpredictable. Resilience, the ability to absorb shocks, adapt to changing circumstances, and continue functioning despite unforeseen challenges, is a critical, often underrated quality for survival and long-term success.
The source uses an analogy for this, right? Turtle versus tiger.
Yes, the turtle versus tiger analogy. It beautifully illustrates two contrasting strategies for survival. The tiger is optimized for speed, power, and efficiency. It's incredibly effective and dominant when times are good and prey is abundant.
Top predator.
Top predator. But it's fragile, it's vulnerable to injury, scarcity, or disease. One bad event, a broken leg, a drought, killing its prey, and it's likely over. No second chances.
Okay. And the turtle.
The turtle, on the other hand, is slow, not particularly powerful, and certainly not optimized for speed, but it has multiple layers of defense and survival mechanisms, a hard shell for protection, the ability to swim, camouflage, hibernation. It's resilient. It survives not by being the fastest or strongest, but by being tough, adaptable, and able to endure unfavorable conditions. It's a tank.
So how does this apply to business or life?
The world is fundamentally uncertain. Therefore, resilience, that toughness, that flexibility, that ability to handle whatever gets thrown at you is a major asset. It means being able to adjust your strategies when conditions change, having buffers to absorb shocks.
Doesn't efficiency usually get prioritized?
Often, yes. And that's the trade-off. The source points out that resilience often looks suboptimal if you only measure for maximum short-term throughput or efficiency. A turtle's shell is heavy. It slows it down, compared to a shell-less reptile.
Sacrificing speed for safety.
Exactly. Businesses that trade away resilience for short-term optimal performance, like the source mentions, big investment banks reducing their cash reserves, seeing them as inefficiently sitting there, to leverage themselves to the hilt and boost short-term earnings, become explosively vulnerable.
Like the tiger. Great when things are good.
Great when things are good, but a small downturn, an unexpected lawsuit, a sudden market shift can cause total collapse because there's no buffer, no shell. Leverage, as the source notes, is like rocket fuel. It can propel you upwards, but it's also highly explosive if anything goes wrong.
So building in buffers is key for resilience.
Prioritizing resilience means building in redundancy, flexibility, and reserves, both personally and in business. It's preparing for the unexpected. Having an emergency fund, insurance, diverse skill sets, adaptable plans. These things might seem inefficient when everything is smooth sailing, but they are cheap insurance that make you dramatically more robust and likely to survive when things inevitably go wrong.
Be a turtle, not just a tiger, especially when facing uncertainty. And since we can't predict the future, especially those external factors that can cause normal accidents or test our resilience, how do we plan effectively? The source talks about scenario planning.
Yes, scenario planning.
Proverbs 27.1 offers some ancient wisdom here. A prudent person foresees danger and takes precautions. The simpleton goes blindly on and suffers the consequences.
That proverb nails it. Predicting the future, the single way things will unfold, is impossible. Anyone who claims they can is, frankly, selling snake oil, especially for businesses or even personal plans whose success depends on complex external factors, market shifts, competitor actions, technological changes, political instability, regulatory environments. Rigid adherence to a single predicted plan is just a recipe for disaster when reality inevitably deviates.
So what does scenario planning involve?
Scenario planning is the antidote to single-point prediction. It's not about predicting the future, it's about preparing for multiple possible futures. It involves systematically constructing several plausible hypothetical situations. What would happen if interest rates doubled next year? What if a major new competitor entered our market? What if a key supplier goes bankrupt? What if customer preferences suddenly shifted due to a cultural trend?
Thinking through different possibilities.
Exactly. And then crucially, mentally simulating how you or your business would respond in each of those distinct scenarios. It's essentially detailed, Systematic counterfactual simulation applied to future possibilities.
So it's about flexibility, not prediction.
Precisely. It's about creating a flexible mental framework and potentially contingency plans for dealing with many possible futures, rather than optimizing solely for one predicted future that probably won't happen exactly as forecast. This process makes a business or any plan far more flexible, adaptable, and ultimately resilient. It forces you to think through potential challenges and opportunities before they happen, allowing for quicker and more effective responses when something unexpected does occur.
Do big companies actually do this?
Absolutely. Large businesses use this constantly with tools like hedging, for example, using financial instruments like futures contracts to offset risks like volatile currency exchange rates or rising commodity prices like oil. If the price of oil goes up, they pay more for fuel for their operations, but they might make money on the future contract they bought, balancing out the negative impact. That's a form of financial scenario planning.
Interesting.
The source rightly notes that scenario planning is often seen as non-urgent strategic work, the kind of thing that's easy to skip when day-to-day operations get busy.
Yeah.
But it's critical, valuable time spent building robustness and resilience. Regularly setting aside dedicated, non-negotiable time for thinking through what-if scenarios is essential for long-term survival and success.
Okay. These tools for observing the world and building robustness patterns, convergence, fighting modal bias, understanding feedback loops, accepting normal accidents, building resilience, using scenario planning seem vital. Let's wrap up by talking about measurement, figuring out what's actually happening in a system and what truly matters.
Right. Measuring progress.
John Tukey's quote is the perfect guide here, I think. It is better to have an approximate answer to the right question than an exact answer to the wrong question.
That's brilliant, and it highlights the primary challenge with measurement in any complex system: information overload. We have the ability now to measure millions of things, but we suffer from cognitive scope limitation. Our brains simply can't process it all effectively. Drowning in data, much of which is irrelevant noise, is a real risk.
So you need to focus.
You absolutely need to focus. This is why we need key performance indicators, KPIs. KPIs are specifically measurements of the critical parts of a system. They are the vital signs. Measurements that don't actually help you understand the system's health or improve the system are essentially useless noise. Or worse, they can be harmful because they distract your limited attention and energy. The focus must be on the vital few metrics that are genuinely predictive of success or failure and help you make informed decisions to guide the system effectively.
But it's tempting to measure what's easy, right?
Exactly. The source warns strongly against fixating on things that are easy to measure but aren't actually important KPIs. Revenue is a classic example. It's easy to measure, it sounds impressive, high turnover, but as Theo Paphitis famously said, profit is sanity, turnover is vanity.
Love
It's
it.
great, isn't it? Revenue is only important because it's a component of profit. If you have $1 million in revenue, but it cost you $2 million to generate it, that's obviously not success. Measuring revenue in isolation without measuring cost and profit is looking at the wrong question, even if the answer, the revenue number, is exact.
What's another example of a bad metric?
The programmer lines of code example is another good one. It's easy to count lines of code, but it's generally not a good KPI for programmer effectiveness or software quality. More lines don't necessarily mean better or more efficient code. Often, a talented programmer might write fewer, more elegant lines to solve a complex problem effectively.
So rewarding lines of code could backfire.
Massively backfire. Rewarding programmers solely based on lines of code creates incentive-caused bias. They'll be incentivized to write bloated, inefficient code just to hit the metric, making the software worse. Good business KPIs typically relate to the core functions of value creation, value delivery, sales, profit, or throughput, measured in ways that align incentives with true system health and improvement. Kaufman actually suggests specific questions in the book to help a business identify its unique, critical KPIs.
Okay, so measure what matters for improvement, not just what's easy to count.
Okay.
But what if your system is just too large, you can't measure everything, even the KPIs, across the whole system all the time?
Right. That brings us to sampling.
Gene Fulgoni's analogy is both vivid and accurate here. If you don't believe in sampling theory, next time you go to the doctor and he wants to take a little blood, tell him to take it all.
Exactly. Don't do that. Sampling is necessary when measuring every single unit, transaction, or event in a large, scalable system is impractical, too expensive, or simply takes too long to be useful. It involves taking a small random percentage of the total output and using that sample as a proxy, a representation, for the characteristics of the entire system.
Like the blood test.
The blood test analogy is perfect. A tiny sample of your blood can reveal systemic issues like high cholesterol or infection markers that are present throughout your entire bloodstream. Similarly, testing a random sample of mobile phones coming off a high-volume production line, maybe 1 in every 20 or 1 in 100, can quickly identify systemic manufacturing errors without the impossible cost and time of testing every single phone individually.
Gives you a snapshot.
It gives you a snapshot, a statistically representative picture. The rate of sampling can be adjusted based on the desired speed versus accuracy trade-off. And things like using secret shoppers in retail are another form of random sampling used to check the quality of customer service across many locations.
We have to be careful about bias, right?
Absolutely critical. The major caveat with sampling is avoiding bias in how you select the sample. The sample must be truly random and representative of the whole system you're trying to measure. Surveying only wealthy property owners in Manhattan, for example, wouldn't give you an accurate picture of average income across the entire United States because the sample isn't representative.
So random is key.
Randomness, or sometimes careful stratification to ensure all subgroups are represented proportionally, is key. Using the largest random sample feasible helps minimize variability and bias, providing more reliable data without the impossible task of measuring everything. Sampling is a really cost-effective way to gain valuable insights from large systems, provided you are vigilant about avoiding bias in how you collect that sample.
That feels very applicable to all the surveys and polls we see every day. Okay, and finally, let's touch on a fundamental economic principle that applies pretty much everywhere. Diminishing returns.
Ah, yes. More isn't always better.
Norman R. Destin puts it sharply. The last 10% of performance generates 1/3 of the cost and 2/3 of the problems.
That's a fantastic way to capture the pain of pushing too far. This principle states that at a certain point, having or investing more of something yields proportionally less benefit and can even become detrimental or counterproductive. It applies to nearly everything good in life eventually.
Like chocolate cake.
Exactly. The source uses simple, relatable examples. Finding $5 when you only have $10 is a huge deal, right? A massive percentage return on your finding effort. Finding $5 when you already have $10 million is negligible. It's basically zero return. Eating 1 cookie might be great. Eating 100 cookies is likely to make you sick, a negative return.
More beer, more vitamins.
More beer after a certain point, more vitamins. Some become toxic in high doses. More study time without rest, you stop absorbing information. More features added to a software product, it becomes bloated and confusing, all subject to diminishing returns.
So how does this play out in business decisions?
In business, the P&G advertising example used in the source is clear. Spending money on a successful TV commercial likely worked really well initially, generating significant revenue. But eventually, the audience gets saturated, the ad wears out, people tune it out. Each additional dollar spent on running that same ad generates less and less incremental revenue.
The effectiveness drops off.
The effectiveness drops off. The point of diminishing returns is reached when the return on investment for that specific action, running the old ad more, drops below the return you could get by investing that dollar elsewhere, like developing a new ad campaign, improving the product, finding new customer segments, etc. Recognizing this point is crucial to avoid wasting resources on increasingly ineffective efforts, and knowing when it's time to pivot your strategy or investment.
Know when to stop pouring water into a leaky bucket.
That's a good way to think about it. Know when to stop or change course. So to kind of sum up this whirlwind tour of concepts from the Personal MBA excerpts we've discussed, the core value, I think, is really about cutting through that vast, overwhelming sea of business information to focus on these fundamental recurring principles. Business isn't some impenetrable wall of jargon. It's built on these recognizable, often common sense ideas about value, people, systems, and measurement.
And the power of that distillation, that filtering for the essentials, isn't confined to launching a startup, is it? This filtering mindset, this search for the core principles, we can apply it anywhere in our lives.
Absolutely.
What are the core components of a healthy relationship? What are the KPIs for your own personal growth? What are the balancing and reinforcing loops driving your habits, good or bad?
Exactly. Let's maybe pull out some of the key practical applications for you, the listener, thinking beyond just the traditional business context.
Yeah, let's make it concrete.
Okay, first, use the 10 factors not just for business ideas, but to critically evaluate any new opportunity, project, or significant commitment in your life. Ask about the urgency. Why now? The required investment, Time, energy, money. The evergreen potential, will this benefit last? The unique value to you.
Apply that checklist broadly. Got it.
Second, see competition not just as a threat, but often as validation of demand. Learn from others by observing or even becoming a customer in different areas of your life where others are doing something you're interested in.
Learn from rivals, don't just fear them.
Third, value genuine, unfiltered feedback. Actively seek out critical opinions on your ideas or actions from people who will be honest, not just polite. And pay most attention to people's willingness to commit or take action, your own personal shadow testing.
Actions over words.
Okay. Fourth, earn attention by being genuinely useful and valuable to others in your interactions. Build permission for ongoing connection based on that value, rather than interrupting people with unsolicited messages or demands on their time.
Be valuable, then ask.
Fifth, focus relentlessly on delivering something economically valuable in your work or contributions, something people actually want and need. And understand and articulate why it's valuable to the recipient. Value-based communication, essentially.
Focus on their why.
Sixth, ruthlessly use risk reversal in your own interactions, offers, or proposals. Make it easy and safe for others to say yes to you by taking on more of the perceived downside or uncertainty yourself. It builds trust.
Make it easy to say yes. Good one.
Seventh, understand your true break-in point for any significant personal endeavor that requires a big upfront investment of time, money, or energy. When will you genuinely recoup that initial cost and start seeing net gains, not just positive steps?
Look at the total picture.
Eighth, use amortization thinking to evaluate large personal purchases or investments of time. What's the cost per use, per project, per year over its expected life? Does that calculation make the investment seem reasonable?
Cost per use.
Okay. Ninth, calculate ROI beyond just money. Prioritize your return on invested time and energy, perhaps above all else. Is the return worth the life you're spending?
The ultimate resource.
10th, apply perceptual control thinking to understand your own behavior, habits, and internal conflicts like procrastination. Identify the competing control systems and their conflicting goals that are fighting for influence over your actions.
Understand the internal battle.
11th, use the fivefold how to break down any daunting goal or desired outcome into a clear chain of concrete, immediate next actions you can take right now. How, until you hit something doable.
Turn big goals into small steps.
12th, practice conscious decision-making even with incomplete information. Use the 40-70% rule, perhaps, to avoid analysis paralysis. And for those tough, equally weighted choices, ask yourself what experience you want to have. And crucially, recognize that failing to decide is a decision, often by default.
Decide consciously.
13th, regularly engage in counterfactual simulation. Actively ask, what would have to be true if? For goals that seem distant or unrealistic. It's an incredibly powerful mental tool for uncovering surprising possibilities and charting paths forward.
What if?
14th, find patterns in your own life and behavior through deliberate experimentation and recording or noting the results. Continuously test what works best for you in terms of energy, productivity, happiness.
Personal science.
15th, be deeply aware of the power of convergence, the influence of the groups you spend time with. Consciously choose your associations if you genuinely want to change your habits, values, or direction in life.
Choose your tribe wisely.
16th, fight your own modal bias. Actively question your automatic assumption that your way is the best or only way. Seek data, feedback, and outside perspectives before settling on an approach or judgment.
Stay humble, stay curious.
17th, look for balancing and reinforcing feedback loops in the systems you interact with your finances, your health habits, your team dynamics, social trends to better understand why things are stable or changing rapidly.
See the system dynamics.
18th, prioritize resilience, be a turtle. Build personal reserves, time, money, energy, skills, and use scenario planning to think through how you'd handle potential future challenges or opportunities. Prepare for uncertainty over optimizing just for today.
Prepare for winter.
19th, measure only what truly matters for improvement. Focus on your personal key performance indicators, KPIs, the things that really drive progress towards your goals, not just vanity metrics or things that are easy to count.
Measure what matters.
And finally, 20th, be aware of diminishing returns in your efforts. Recognize when putting more time, money, or energy into something is yielding less and less benefit, and know when it's time to change your approach or invest your resources elsewhere.
Know when to stop or pivot.
Wow.
That's a lot of takeaways.
It is, and you can see how these concepts are deeply interconnected, right? Understanding attention sheds light on permission. Understanding feedback loops helps explain resilience and normal accident.
They build on each other.
They really do. And ultimately, wrestling with these principles of business, as Kaufman presents them, also forces you to ask those fundamental questions about yourself as the source prompts. Do you use your body optimally? Do you know what you want? How do you perform best? And maybe most importantly, what do you really need to be happy and fulfilled?
Those are the ultimate KPIs.
In a sense, yes, they're the essential KPIs for your personal operating system.
It really does provide a powerful framework, a way to see the underlying mechanics in so many areas of life, empowering you, hopefully, to make more intentional and effective choices. And that brings us toward the end of this deep dive into some of the foundational concepts distilled in Josh Kaufman's The Personal MBA.
We've only scratched the surface, of course. As we said, the full book covers many more valuable principles and goes into greater depth.
But hopefully this gave you a solid taste. Thank you for joining us on this exploration today.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in. As you wrap up thinking about this deep dive, maybe consider that concept of risk reversal once more. Think about applying it not just in a business transaction context, but maybe in a personal relationship or an interaction where trust or vulnerability is involved.
How so?
What if you were consciously willing to take on more of the perceived risk for the other person in that exchange? Maybe being the first to apologize or the first to be vulnerable, or offering support without demanding an immediate return. How might that willingness to absorb some risk change the nature of the connection and the depth of trust that could build between you?
That's a really interesting thought. Applying risk reversal to relationships.
Something to mull over.
Definitely something to mull over. Think about that and how all these ideas might resonate in your own life and work. We'll see you on the next deep dive.